Hello, I am Kayla Eldridge, and today we are going to discuss a case study called Copyright and the Computer, Regulations Governing Technology. This is a summary of the case as presented with the who, what, where, when, and why considered. Who is involved in this case? First, we have Keith Sample, who is principal at St. Regis School. He is fairly new to the school, with this being his third year, and he is not a longtime resident of the town. Next, we have the 20 teachers at the school, including the two third grade teachers, Mrs. Williams and Mrs. Brandon. We have Mrs. Lynn, the computer library assistant. She was hired because the school was unable to hire a full-time librarian. Next, we have the PTA, including Mrs. Evans, who was the president. She also helped Mrs. Lynn make copies while volunteering in the library. The Parent-Teacher Association also does one of the two major fundraisers for the school, which pays for the technology and the software. Indirectly involved is the students in the K-8 school, the Board of Education, the superintendent, and the software publisher. What has happened? Mrs. Lynn and Mrs. Evans have made digital copies of software and are distributing them to teachers. Mrs. Brandon believes this is a copyright infringement and refused the copies. Mrs. Williams thanked Mrs. Lynn for the copies. And Mrs. Brandon goes to Mr. Sample, the principal, with her concerns of copyright infringement. So Mr. Sample agrees that it is a copyright infringement and tells Mrs. Lynn to stop making copies and retrieve and destroy any copies she has already distributed. The students, Board of Education, superintendent, and software publisher do not know of the event. The event took place in a K-8 rural school, a small town called St. Regis. There's about 420 students in the school. It took place during the school year, though the purchasing of the original software did take place last year. And why did it happen? Mrs. Lynn was wanting to save some money for the Parents-Teacher Association because she knew that there was a tight budget. So with this issue, we have both legal and ethical issues at play. The legal issues that could come up are copyright infringement. It could happen because of the software copying and distribution. If there's policies in the school regarding copyright, there could be policy disregard. There could also be a breach of contract due to not following the law and the policies. These could engine charges for Mrs. Lynn, Mr. Sample, or St. Regis School. Next are the ethical issues. The principal was not kept in the loop as to what was happening, and the differences in opinion between the teachers could cause discourse within that staff. There were possibly more teachers involved since they're wanting the copies. Students seeing this act as being an okay decision because teachers are doing it, so students kind of do as I do type thing. The summary would be the library assistant at St. Regis K-8 school has made copies of software and distributed them to teachers, which could be a copyright infringement, and the principal must decide what the next steps are needed to handle the situation, which was brought to his attention by another teacher. So we've thus far gone over what we know has happened in the case, and sometimes as a leader we must investigate what has happened in order to get all of the details of an event. We'll next cover the information that was missing from the case. So first, the people. I'd want to know what the superintendent has to say on this subject. As a new principal, only being in the district for 3 years, I don't know that I would have the information to set for the precedents that had happened. For place, I would want to know what the reason was for the 3 teachers not bringing students into the lab. Was there something preventing them? Were those the teachers that were getting the copies, or were other teachers getting the copies? Also, last on the programs piece of things, I would want to know the policy for the school. What's the policy also for the software copy? Because when you do the research, the 1976 U.S. Copyright Act and its 1980 amendments remain vague in some areas of software use and its application to education. Where the law itself is vague, software licenses tend to be much more specific, and it's imperative that educators read that software's copyright page and understand the licensing restrictions that are there. And that's per Inghagen in 1997. Next is the priorities. The situation needs to be resolved as quickly and efficiently as possible. The first priority would be getting the facts that are unknown. Without the full story, the situation cannot be properly handled. The unknown facts here are what exactly was copied and who got the copies, the copyright of the software that was copied, the school policies on copyright, and the superintendent's viewpoint, as she has a long history with the district, which would be able to show that precedence. The second priority would be to meet with the stakeholders. I always want to make sure that the district is all on the same page, and so meeting with the district administration and the board would be ideal. If a copy infringement has occurred, the next person to meet with would be that software company. Then we would need to have a meeting with teachers to ensure the record is set straight and they know the policy moving forward. Then we would also need to meet with the students and possibly the parents to say what communication has happened and what steps were taken to resolve the situation. That way the students know what has been done, and that while Mrs. Lynn was being well-intentioned, it may not have been done in the proper procedure that should have been followed. There's a few options at this point. We could take no action as the copies have been destroyed and no one outside of the school knows of the event. We could take a hard stance against what happened and fire the library assistant and ask the PTA president to step down. Or we could ensure minimal damage by contacting the software company and working with them to find a solution. So we're going to evaluate those possible plans. Simpson in 2001 said about computer software that you can make backup copies of computer software, even CD-ROMs, and make a single backup copy of computer documentation, but you may not network software unless it's licensed for networking, and you may not exceed your license limitations for software. So I think that that's an important detail to kind of keep in mind as we work through this case. First, we have not doing any action at all. The copies are already destroyed and no one outside of the school knows about the issue, so we just continue on as is. The problem with this is Mrs. Brandon might feel like there is a problem and she could go to the software company and report the problem. Then the district and myself as principal would be liable for damages, as I knew about the incident and did not rectify the problem. It also doesn't solve the ethical issues that occurred. It seems like an easy option at first, but it's only a short term and doesn't really give a long-term fix to the problem. Second, we have the hardline stance. I could fire the library assistant and ask the PTA president to step down as they have broken the law. The problem with this one is that we don't know for sure that they have broken any laws or policies, as we have not reviewed those yet. It could solve the legal issues and the ethical issues, but I'm not sure that we want to be sending the message to students that any mistake they make can have dire consequences. It also would not help with staff relations, and it may not solve the issue. The software company could still come back and sue the school, and the school would be liable for damages anyway. Last, we have the minimal damage response. And for this one, it would require us to work with the software company and district staff in order to solve the issue. It could end up being higher upfront costs for it, and it might take more time in the beginning, but it would solve both the legal and the ethical concerns of the case. It would also set a good example for staff and students of how to work through a problem. So kind of the plan development, we've identified the problem. We know that the library assistant at St. Regis K-8 school has made copies of software and distributed them to teachers, which could be a copyright infringement. And myself as principal needs to decide what are the next steps to handle the situation. which was brought to my attention by another teacher. We did explore the information of who, what, where, when, and why. We also explored the missing information and evaluated the possible solutions. So it's now time to develop the best plan of action for minimal damage. So to implement a minimal damage plan, we would first need to gather data. I would need to know what was copied and who got copies of that software. I would need to review the copyright statement for the software that was copied to let me know if the software infringement has indeed occurred. I would need to review the school policy on copyright to let me know if the policy disregard or contract breach has occurred. I would also need to speak with the superintendent to find out the precedents and get her in the loop. This could ensure a path forward is what's expected in the district. I would then need to start contacting the stakeholders. First would be the software company if I found any wrongdoing and work with them on a path to fixing the problem. I would also need to contact Mrs. Lynn for any corrective actions that's needed or to let her know that what she did was okay. I need to contact Mrs. Adams for follow-up if needed. I need to contact Mrs. Brandon for follow-up to let her know what the district is doing or not doing for the situation. I need to work with the superintendent and the board if any policy changes are made in the future. I need to have a meeting with the staff to go through the process of what failed and how to keep it from happening again. And I would also like to meet with parents and students so that about what has happened and how it was handled for transparency purposes. And if this plan doesn't work, I think we would need to go to a stronger plan of action for our solution. In conclusion, for PLO 6, that's operations and management. In this case, I was able to use a problem-solving approach to solve a problem that will have a solution that will support school improvement. I was able to look at the problem from different perspectives and then take the data into consideration when deciding a plan of action. This also allowed me to apply copyright laws to a school situation. My relevancy this case was relevant to my learning because copyright laws are part of daily life in a school. I need to know how to review laws and policies and to problem solve with stakeholders so that we can continue to have a relationship that's valuable for my school. As I reflect back on the assignment, I can see I will be a better leader by, number one, using a model to problem solve to ensure I get all of the facts and think through the consequences of my actions. The library assistant had good intentions, but needs to be operating within the confines of current laws and policies. Number two, having the capability to reflect on my work and see how I need to improve. This has taught me an important process of reflection in leadership. And then here I have my resources that were used for my case study. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.